Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's professional learning session. I'm Emily Sumner, and I'll be your host. Before we dive into all of the great strategies for working with K through 12 newcomer English learners, I'm just going to review a few quick tips to help the webinar run smoothly for you. The GoToWebinar platform, you may not be as familiar with as Zoom, but it does not have a group chat. But we do welcome your questions and your feedback, and we're going to be holding a short Q&A period at the end of the presentation. If you locate the questions icon on your control panel, if you click on that, you can send your questions in there, and we'll put them in the queue to be answered during the Q&A at the end. If you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can use that same questions feature to send me a note, and I'll do my best to resolve the problem for you. One thing you can do right now to try to help everything run smoothly is to close all of your internet browser tabs and other programs on your computer. So close down Word, PowerPoint, and again, all those browser tabs you may have open in Google. When you do that, and I know it's hard to do it, to let go of multitasking, but when you do, that just ensures all of your computer and internet bandwidth goes to power the webinar platform. If you do have audio or video lags that don't smooth out after a few seconds, you can try logging out of GoToWebinar and coming right back in, and that usually resets the connection for you. We are recording the webinar today, so if you're not able to stay for the whole presentation, that is okay. We'll be sharing that recording with you by email in the next day or two, and we'll also share the slide deck and your certificate of attendance. So keep an eye on your email inbox either tomorrow or Friday morning for that information. And we'll also be posting the recording to the Ballard and Ty website, where you'll find many other on-demand webinars for your professional learning. All right, I think we are ready to get started. So I am pleased to invite Pamela Abbey and Brenda Adiva to join me on screen. Pamela and Abby are both educational consultants with Ballard and Ty, and they are going to be your instructors today. They've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to them.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Pam. I am a educational consultant here at Ballard and Ty. I handle all of the East Coast. So you will see some clarification at the end if you're looking to get in touch with us. I do handle the East Coast. I have about 11 years of experience in the classroom with English learners, as well as my master's in second language studies and literacy. So I'm going to introduce you to my counterpart here, Brenda.
Hi, my name is Brenda Adiva. Some of you probably have known me as Brenda Rosas. I got married over the summer and my name has changed. So I have actually spent 15 years in secondary. I love those babies, 6 through 12, multi-level classrooms. I've actually even taught Chinese in high school for 4 years. I speak 5 languages. I love languages. I love anything to do with English learners. All right, so agenda today, we are going to be talking about the Ballard and Ty philosophy, which generally is what we talk about all the time when we have these webinars. We are going to actually, though, focus today on targeted instruction through the functions of languages. So what do students do with a language? Things like naming things, expressing likes and dislikes, all the way to things like compare and contrast. But today, we're going to focus only on the functions of language for newcomers. We're going to give you some strategies and examples just from our experience from teaching, some examples from Ballard and Ty materials. Pamela's going to primarily focus on the younger newcomers and then me on the older newcomers, so the 6 through 12. As a part of our philosophy, you're going to see a very structured and systematic language development approach in all of our materials, but generally what we believe in. Explicit vocabulary teaching is number 1. So we always believe in vocabulary, always taught through some kind of context. We then have grammatical forms, things like nouns, adjectives, adverbs, all your verb tenses, definitely punctuation, things like that. But the functions of languages, that's the third thing, and that's what we're going to focus on today. You are going to see some a lot of social language at the newcomer level. And then later on, as we do webinars throughout this year, we're going to focus on the higher level, slowly go level by level to the higher level functions where you'll have a lot more academic language. At Ballard and Ty, we always believe in a balanced approach of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So there will always be an integration of skills. Generally, we start with listening and speaking to then do some writing and maybe read your own writing, but always we believe in integrated skills. So the targeted function approach we're going to teach today is really going to be about the functions of languages. We're going to be covering 4 of them. The first one is naming people, things, places, and actions. Second function, responding and issuing commands. That's going to be definitely important right at that newcomer level. So Pamela's going to cover a lot of this about how students might be lost, right? And how they need to focus on listening and following commands. Using social language. Again, Pamela is going to talk about this really like how you do social language in the classroom to practice it for what they need outside of the classroom as well. Asking and answering questions, that will be kind of the entry gate into a little bit more academic. Okay. All right. Take it away, Pamela.
All right, so you guys should probably know I have most of my experience in the K-8 setting. I spent a lot of time in kindergarten, but mainly with newcomers. So you'll see that a lot of the things that I recommend are going to be related to the younger students, and Brenda, again, the high school and middle school area. But we feel that a lot of these are really able to flow and flex across the areas of student age. Just they're all really good support systems for our newcomer students. So in function 1, we're really looking at that target of giving the students a direction and seeing what they can do, or if they can respond to it. So when we start with our younger students, we're always going to have students in the classroom who are learning the same thing as they are if we start at the super young age. But if we're in the middle of the group, there's going to be a lot of students who are able to demonstrate the tasks and help you along, but we want to make sure that we're checking for these things too. So like pointing when we're introducing vocabulary, just here's a picture, what is this? What is this? And then asking the students to point to things as well. We can have others demonstrate the task and then the student do it. And then testing them one-on-one is super important to see if they understand that task or that answer to the task, because they could always look at their peers and say, Joey did that, I can do that too. So we want to make sure we're assessing and a chance where students aren't seeing each other do that activity. I always look at displaying target frames for help. So even if you're not getting a reader to look at your sentence frames, you can still put them up on the board, follow along to give them an association. So point to that and have your things there. Then you could also change out your pictures for things around the classroom. So maybe you have a bunch of pictures of pens, but then you could put different pens, different colors, different things around your classroom and ask them to find that. Get them moving, get them engaging in the language as well. So you're teaching those target frames, but you're also teaching them in an activity setting. So you can also say and step it up with, is this a? So instead of just expecting them to say this is a, you can ask that question, is this a pen? With that expected response, yes or no. You can then take that expectation to your students to the next level as they increase in their ability and add, is this a pen? Yes, this is the pen, is what's the expectation, or no, this is not a pen. So we want them in that full sentence skill. Now, a lot of our younger students in general are still struggling to make that full sentence conversation. So we're still practicing with them and giving them those examples on the board. But thematic vocabulary and context is also a really important part of this age group, and especially for just learning newcomers and learning vocabulary, more pictures the better, right? So we can teach thematic vocabulary using our theme and picture cards. We can look at the picture, like here we have the family, and ask the students to point out those target vocabulary. So for this, it would be things like mother, father, sister, baby, brother, and then we can ask them, what do they see? And then see if they can identify some of the target vocabulary before you teach it to activate what prior knowledge they may have. But you're still teaching that same context. You could also then move to a story about a family or look at a story that has a similar topic and use things like point to the mother, point to the father, circle the brother, or this is a sister, this is a brother, asking those questions to get their response once they've already mastered that conversational target frame. So you may stay in the point to the stage for quite some time and then eventually move forward into the this is us stage. It's just up to your student and how they're growing. You don't necessarily have to identify all of these things and practice them right in the beginning. So of course, with our word and picture cards here at Ballard and Ty, I love how they're set up because we get a picture card and a word card that are two separate things. A lot of times we use tons of flashcards with our students because, you know, we want them to identify the photo and the word, or just to really get that rote memorization type of practice as they're learning new things. But we can activate prior knowledge using these picture and word cards too. So maybe we have a pocket chart and we're going to put those cards up there with just the pictures. Ask the students what they see. Show them the word. Maybe they have a couple pictures to pick from in front of them and they can match the picture to the word. Or maybe they've never seen something before that, you know, maybe they don't have in their country or they've never been exposed to. Then that's a learning experience to help them find something that they can make a connection to. With the pocket chart also, we can introduce those pictures and word cards. So we can show the picture, then put the word next to it to make that connection. We could also have the students playing I Spy. So we could give them the picture and just see if they can find another thing like it in the classroom. Or once we've taught the word, we could put that in the chart and ask them to look around the classroom for that word and see if they get it correctly. I personally like to hide things around the classroom that are part of that topic. So maybe if you have little dolls and you're still on that family topic, you could hide a mother, brother, you know, different people around your room, or even just print some off from the internet and have your students go find them. They can make those connections and it gets them up and moving because we know those little guys always have lots and lots of energy. And then we also have individual student cards. So if you have flashcards or just your student cards with the pictures on them, they could be sitting around the table with you and you could put the word card in the middle and match the picture to the word. I don't know, I just have this image of students with their flashcards and the teacher kind of all playing looks like poker, but you're matching up all of your students with their words and picture cards. So it's a great way to get them moving. And of course, we always want to be working in sentence frame as much as possible because we want our students to continue to conversate in full sentences whenever possible. So I always introduce the sentence frame to the student. So even if they might not be able to read it, we can practice by subbing in a picture card or a word card into that sentence frame for practice. They could also start to maybe identify the sounds of letters that they may know as they're learning, or they may identify sight words they've learned. So it gives them some connection to the written language, even though we're looking for that oral output in conversation. So it gives that visual of the conversational turns so they can see, like, if somebody asks this, this is their response, things like that. So it's a great way to practice and get ready to prepare for that dialogue and conversation as well. All right, Brenda, go ahead and take it away for the.
All right. So when we are talking about naming things, people, places, actions with secondary newcomers, actually, I want to include 4th, 5th in the older section. So with that, just like Pamela said, we do a lot of like pointing, yes or no, either or questioning for newcomers. But the major difference when we talk about secondary students is time, right? So you have to get them from 0 to like level 2 a lot faster than you might do with a kindergartner. So really you are teaching with these older newcomers the 0 level, all that pointing, etc., then vocabulary, but then you got to get to writing as quickly as possible. We are going to look at the next slide, which is the same theme picture Pamela was talking about. Now, I do want to address this as a secondary teacher. We might think as teachers, oh, the picture is kiddish. Oh, it was made for little kids. It's cartoons. Well, any image, as long as it helps students at secondary level make a connection, is super powerful. I'm going to admit I'm an adult. I still watch cartoons, right? We still enjoy it here and there. So as long as you present the image for a specific reason and the students know why you're doing it, you can use any image. So let's take this image, for example. It's a picture of a family having a picnic. Same idea, father, mother, sister, exactly what Pamela said. Pointing, yes, no, etc. But the difference is you got to get to that a little bit higher, a little faster. So I might say, instead of just naming things, let's name some actions. What is a family doing? What is happening in this picture? Eating, right? Eat food, they are eating. Maybe they don't know the present progressive tense yet, that's okay. But they're still using verbs now, nouns and verbs, okay? So actions, you really got to teach that a lot faster with your secondary newcomers. On the back side of this card, you are going to see a lot of different like listening and speaking activities, reading and writing activities. If you don't have these cards, I'm just simply giving you some examples of what to practice with a picture. Pointing, right? Is this the yes or no? Maybe they have no language. It's like yes or no. Is this the father? Yes or no? Or who is this? Fill in the blank. This is the mother. Again, Pamela said that, but I just want to show you a little bit more clearly the activities on the back of this card. Word level, you have to get to writing as quickly as possible, even if it's just writing a word. So vocabulary, make sure they learn how to write those words. Make sure they learn how to read those words, right? But if you look over here to the early intermediate side, what is happening in this picture? What are the children doing? Naming actions is really part of this first function that secondary you really have to get to. All right, moving on, we're going to now look at word lists as parts of speech, because realistically, we don't have word and picture cards or flashcards really at the secondary level. You can always make them, that's up to you. But parts of speech word lists, we're going to look at that and think about noticing and revisiting. So here's an example of nouns 1, a word list. You're going to see items that they see at school. Well, first notice there are no images. We're going to talk about that later. Always teach with images, whether it's a picture for reading or images for the vocabulary. But the first thing I want to do here is when I give the students a word list, highlight, circle, whatever you need to do, the words that you already know. You want to know as a teacher what your students already know. So this is a quick assessment. They're highlighting, circling, you're walking around. Okay, monitor is something I'm going to have to teach everybody because they don't know, right? Or principal. Okay, they all know principal. Great. Maybe not. Spanish speakers will know director. But anyway, the idea is you are noticing what you already know. The next slide is going to show you verbs, a list of verbs. So we definitely want to teach actions. Remember, we talked about that in this first function. There are your verbs. Make sure that you figure out what they know and don't know. And if they say they know it, you can always assess them. Like Pamela, can you make a sentence with to help? So she'll give me a sentence and I'm like, okay, they really do know that verb, right? So have them mark this up as their word list. All right, moving to the next part, you need to then teach the vocabulary. So disappearing vocabulary is a great first step to that. Now, disappearing vocabulary, the purpose isn't really to know what these words mean. I have no idea what the words mean as a student yet, that's okay. It's about practicing pronunciation, feeling that word in your mouth, then it kind of goes into that memory, muscle memory, whether you believe in muscle memory or not, it kind of goes there. So what you're gonna do is have the students repeat board, they then say board, book, they then say book. After you've said all the words once, then you're gonna do this rhythmic pattern of board, book, chair, clock, board, book, chair, clock. And then Pamela's gonna erase one of the words, board, and then it'll say board, book, chair, clock, board, book, and they still have to put, you know, the word in that blank. So eventually it'll be board, book, chair, clock, all gone, right? And the students will be like board, book, chair, clock, board, book, chair, clock, and they'll know the vocabulary. I'm not sure how I feel about this with younger kids because I've never really taught them. So you can decide if you want to try this with younger, but definitely you'll have those words and now you have to teach the words, right? So we're going to go to the next part about using images. How are you going to get students to talk about vocabulary with images? Well, here's flag. You could see flag, student, backpack, school, right? You're going to see some of those vocabulary words in this picture. So I wouldn't actually teach the words. I might say, does anybody see a flag? Does anybody know what a flag is? So at secondary, I always want my students to do the teaching to each other. I'll make the corrections, but as much of the delivery that they can do, it's better for me, right? So the idea is, and well, better for them. So maybe I'll say, oh, is there a backpack in this picture? Point to the backpack, right? Or what else do you see? So let's say we taught vocabulary through this. We could then move on to the next step of let's actually do some vocabulary through slides. Okay, so we are going to look at picture this. So picture this is an activity with slides. basically teachers do not do all the work for your students, have them do it. So what I would do is take that word list, break it up into groups, and I would say, Pamela, group 1, you guys are in charge of 5 words. I want you to look for vocabulary words, put them on slides. So in picture this, when you go to the next slide, you're going to see just the picture. Okay, so students are making a slide just with a picture of board. The next slide will then be the word and the picture. So we all know whiteboards are now more popular, so board. And then what you'll do is as a teacher, I'll take Pamela's group, I'll take Emily's group, and group 3's slides, put them all together. So on the next slide, it says a combined slide, right? So you're gonna combine it all into one file, and then you're going to put it up on the screen and test students just the picture. They then say board. You show them the word. That way you're always connecting the word and the image. This is a higher level, I guess, like older kid technology way of doing it versus the flashcards. And it is really effective because if you have Chromebooks or iPads, students can walk around testing each other, you know, kind of to practice the vocabulary in a flashcard way, but you have done nothing to make the flashcards for them. All right, moving on, we're going to now talk about images and also words in context, right? So we talked about the vocabulary, how you can introduce it, but let's talk about how it's shown in context because we have to get there. All right, so this is a reading called My First Day of School. There you'll see the bolded vocabulary, door, school, student, principal. So one note, if you are not working with our material or a set curriculum, you can take any reading or write a paragraph on your own, and that might be a little bit harder, but you are picking the vocabulary based on the reading instead of the other direction of picking a list and putting it into a reading, right? So I can look at this reading, take the vocabulary out. Those are my vocabulary lists and do everything I just said. Now you're at this point, oh, look, the vocabulary is in context, right? So door, school, student, principal, you see the picture again at the bottom of your screen. That is going to help with understanding this. So now you're seeing a big door. I walk through the big door, right? So now they can visualize door, what's happening with the door, the student, the school, principal. All right, on the next slide, you're going to then see other ways we can see words in context. Maybe it's through pointing like the theme pictures, right? Or the picture of the first day of school. We can do all the yes, no, either, or, etc. Circle, underline, highlight, name things, right? So then you'll see like worksheets. You might have a worksheet with just all the pictures and then they write the words. Or this is a blank. We talked about sentence frames. We love sentence frames even at secondary level, except it might be in the form of a worksheet. It might be in sentence frames and pocket charts. Categorizing is another great higher level skill, but really great for newcomers at secondary. Here's a T-chart. Here's the words. Put all the nouns in one list, put all the verbs in another, put all things having to do with people in one side, and objects on the other side, right? So the idea is you are teaching them to categorize, which is an academic skill, but you're doing it with words that they understand. Matching, we always can do matching. And then drag and drop. If you ever wanted to do a digital slide with a T-chart, you could have images and words, and you could drag and drop them to make it a little bit more interactive, or make it for the students to complete as an activity. All right, so we are going to now talk about function 2. Go ahead, Pamela.
All right, so moving into function 2, we're looking more at teaching the classroom type survival language. So we're getting the students to a place where they're going to be able to give us basic communication as they're moving throughout their day. So we're teaching students the things that they need to know, not just a response to a specific question. So we're looking at things like how to raise your hand. What is the expectation for raising your hand? So that's, again, going to be something you're going to want to test them individually or just observe them around, not around their peers. So those commands and things that they need to do. So raise your hand, sit down, line up, walk quietly. Those are school structures that we do here in the United States that may not be the same school structure they do other places. Walking quietly in a hallway is not necessarily the norm everywhere else. Some of my students didn't know how to get in a line because when you went in the hall, it was kind of a free-for-all. So we have a very structured approach in a lot of our schools, and we have to teach those routines. So that's kind of what you're teaching here. You're also teaching them things like voice level and being quiet in certain areas of the school or things like that. One of the things I always think about in this too is, how do they know where to put their things every day? So do they put their backpack in a certain spot? Do they sit on the carpet when they come in every morning? What are those routine structures that we need our kids to know in order to be successful in school? So for example, the Turnitin bin down here, what do they do with that folder that they take home every night? You know, I take this home, I don't really know what I do with it, but I have to do something with it when I get back. Teaching them to take that out of their backpack and put it into that bin every day, or, you know, whatever their peers are doing. So a lot of this is just getting them accustomed and teaching them how to do school like we do school in your classroom. So very specific things to your classroom, but also very transferable skills that they're going to use like in church, in public settings, things like that. They'll be able to take those cues from other people and apply them in other places. All right, Brenda.
So for older newcomers, this might feel a little odd. Like, why am I teaching them the same things they would learn in their younger kid grades, right? Well, responding and issuing commands is a very early function in a language. Let me give you an example. I know this is a bad example because my daughter was young when I was doing it, but in Chinese, I had to tell her, come here, give this to me, you know, like listen to, like eat this, drink this. So I was issuing commands and she was responding. Well, responding doesn't take any language, right? So they can just respond and do things. So if you think of this as an older newcomer, when they have no language yet, if they can listen and respond without any verbals, right, then you know they are understanding you. Well, just fast forward, my Chinese was not good enough to keep going with my daughter when she started actually having dialogue. So that's when I stopped. But that just proves that function 2 is a low level newcomer skill. Classroom survival, same, right? Testing, older newcomers have to take tests. You're going to see a lot of them listening and speaking time. Social language as well. So for older newcomers, sentence frames are really good. Act it out. I know it feels weird and odd, but act it, like show me or give me, put it here, right? Help them understand what you're saying. And then on the next slide here are just some quick examples of some of the action words. Teach the action words, show the commands, gesture it, even though it feels weird because you are with older. I mean, I gesture all the time when I'm talking. So just kind of imagine that. So open, like raise your hand, right? And assess one-on-one. For older newcomers, you have to assess one-on-one because it's very difficult to, in large class settings, right, to like see that they understand those actions. All right, I'm going to pass this back over to Paola.
All right, so we are starting now to switch into more specific communication needs in our younger students when we get into function 3. We're going to see a lot of the same stuff apply, so we're going to do this as a conversation for all students. These are basic skills that are going to be for any newcomer coming into your classroom. So we're learning how to communicate our basic needs and just wants and things throughout the day of our class, right? So of course, basic survival language is hello, that introduction, my name is, my teacher is. I always think back to my little kids that have zero language, and recess, restroom breaks, whatever, they seem to get separated from their classroom at least once, right? You know their name and their teacher's name. You can get them back to where they need to be, right? So when you have little people, it can quickly be confusing for them to get lost in a big building or whatever if they get separated. So knowing their name is one of the most important things that you can do in a school day, and knowing their teacher's name. Now, for an older student, that's going to be more complex because they typically have more than one teacher, right? But if they know their name, the grade that they're in, and maybe have a list with them of their teachers, that will help them get to the right place as they're, going from class to class or whatever that may be. But we also want to look at things like the conversation of, what is your name and my name is. So we're increasing the rigor of the expectation. So, we want to get them to the point of my name is, but in response to the cue of what is your name, not just being able to say my name is, We want them to know when it's appropriate to respond to a question with my name is, or hello, or my teacher is. So we also want to look at I need help, maybe asking someone in the building that speaks to see if they speak their native language. Do you speak Spanish? I had students who would ask every single teacher they came across because we were only Spanish speaking in our building and we were like really high Spanish speaking. So they would just look at people, any adult they could find, do you speak Spanish? And anybody they could talk to, that's what they wanted to do sometimes. So it just gives them that sense of feeling at home too, if they can ask someone for help in their native language. Of course, things like I'm hungry, that's a good one because we need them to be able to express that need. We also want to look at the social language amongst their peers. When I was living in a different country, one of the first phrases I learned to say was, what's up? Because when you're with your friends, when you're with your peers, that's the first thing you ask people, right? Hey, how are you? What's going on? How's it going? Que lo que was one of the first things I learned. I thought it was something else from formal Spanish instruction. And as soon as I lived in the Dominican, it was que lo que, everywhere we went, you know? So you teach them things that they're going to understand with their peers. They're going to probably learn it from their peers too. We also want to look at things like, can you say that slower? How old am I? I like to play. I don't like to play. Those things that they need to share with their peers to kind of make the basic connections. Do you want to be my friend? Might be a can of worms to open with some students, but at least it's giving them that beginning conversation piece. Do you want to play? Where is the lunchroom? Things that they talk to their peers about. Those basic social skills are really how we want to teach them. And you can do those things just like we did in the previous. Show the pictures, show them the sentence frames, and ask them to, follow through with those as well. We also can look for asking for help and permission. These are really important because we need to know when a student doesn't know, right? So we want them to say to their teachers, I don't understand, I don't speak English, please help me, I don't know how to do this. Those are really important phrases. Little things too, like, can you help me? Just in general, can you help me? It doesn't have to be applicable to anything except for maybe the fact that they need help. They don't know where they are. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what this paper means, whatever. Can you help me can get them so many different places, right? And you can just teach that in the sense of, making a connection to a picture with help. Like we have this guy, he looks really confused. Or you can look at someone who's hurt in a picture, maybe not, they fell on their bike and they need help, talking about that. He fell, whatever. It just depends on your student's level, how you want to teach that phrase. Bathroom, that's also survival language, but it's also asking permission. So we're going to need to ask where the bathroom is. May I use the bathroom? Can I use the bathroom? Depending on how you teach that phrase. And all of your students are going to need to be able to communicate that properly. My favorite thing to do with all of these different things is a building walk. I had the privilege of being able to have most of my newcomer students in small group or one-on-one settings when I got them. It was very, timing. Timing is an important thing. So I would take my students in groups of 2 mainly, no more than 2. It gets too confusing. And we would walk around the school, talk about these things. Well, what is this? Identify, door, target vocabulary that maybe we're working on. Or we would look at, this is the bathroom. Ask me, how do you go to the bathroom? Ask me. We would go to the lunchroom. What do you do here? Can I get a sandwich? Can I get a drink of water? Things like that. All of those different rooms have different functions and different expectations for asking for help or permission. So we would use that as we walk throughout the hall as well. You could also teach those structures of walking quietly, standing in a line, little things like that as well in that building walk activity. Plus, if you run into anybody in the hallway, they can introduce themselves. Hi, my name is Annalise. My teacher is so-and-so. It's a great way just to openly practice. Okay, and then of course, dialogue. Dialogue is huge. So that example that I just mentioned of running into an adult in the hallway to introduce themselves to, always great. I would always take them to the office to meet the secretary or the principal and have them say hello, the guidance counselor, people that they needed to know. and begin that conversational structure. So at this point, they're not just, hi, I'm Annalise, but maybe they're, hi, I'm Annalise. I'm in Mrs. Johnson's class. I'm 10 years old, you know, and they're going back and forth in the questions that they're being given. You can also do this in small group in the classroom or pairs. Have the students start with sentence frames on the board to start a conversation. For example, like give them the greetings. Hello, my name is, and ask the question, how old are you? And then maybe they can take it to the next step. You could give them a structure of an outline of a conversation and have them fill in the blanks depending on how old they are. You can really take this from basic, just one question to answer, and have a full conversation as well. I love the image below where we can look at putting a comic strip together. You can see that she's talking to someone's telling her something about social media, and she's got a picture with the words above it. We could give our students a picture, maybe of target vocabulary, and have them put a conversation together between, here it looks like the internet or whoever's outside of that door, but you could give them 2 people and have them write that comic strip to create that conversation as well. So that is going to be the majority of function 3, teaching that basic dialogue and conversation in the skill.
Right. So we are going to move on to function 4. I do want to talk a little bit about, for older newcomers, just a little bit of pacing. So social language is hugely important. You know, function 3, responding and issuing commands, function 2, and then of course naming things, all are very important. But with secondary older newcomers, you don't really have, again, that benefit of time, right? So if you can do that really in the first 1 to 2, maybe 3 months, that's kind of where you want to like average. Starting in month 3, you really need to get to asking and answering questions, okay? For younger students, you have a little bit more time and you will get to asking and answering questions a little bit more open-ended, which is kind of where we're heading, a little bit more academic in nature, but you do have a little bit more time to do that, and they will continue to learn that over time. Whereas secondary, really, that month 4, let's get moving. Month 3, let's get moving on asking and answering questions. So even if it's just still yes or no, either or questions, right? You can do a lot of things with that. So a really good start, whether it's big, I always do this wrong, big versus little, short, tall, right? So that's kind of in the younger age range where you're doing actions to help them. Well, big versus little for older, I might just show pictures of a big, you know, car and a small car. But really adjectives, either or, one-word responses, adverbs are very, very important to teach, because remember, we're going back to the nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, so parts of speech, right? Colors you have to teach, yes, definitely. So use words to describe something with color, size, shape, maybe even feelings, right? And really help students with that. Always start the day with some kind of social language, just piggybacking on what basically Pamela said, but this is a good warm up where it's still question and answer, right? So do you go to school? Yes or no? What school do you go to? Start with like a tiny warm up of some kind of social language and then go into academic. Always have them answer in complete sentences when teaching academic English, right? Because then students will get used to rephrasing. And I know Pamela said this earlier, but really with secondary, you got to get them to write in complete sentences and maybe even restate the question. And then you're going to assess one-on-one, okay? So let's look at this. We're going to keep going. So the idea of who, what, where, when, why, sometimes how, right? But what do you see is going to be the main focus of this next slide. So when we talk about what do you see, right? Who, what, where, when, why, on the next picture slide, we're going to, yep, thank you. What do you see? You're going to ask students to point, but really, what do you see? You want an answer, right? So name things, name actions. And you're going to give them different pictures. So what is happening with this family? What do you see? Oh, they're peeling corn as a family. Maybe they're preparing lunch, or they've just picked something from the garden. So you want them to be able to explain now with higher, sentence structures and to talk a little bit more conceptually about the picture. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. On this who, what, where, when, why. So if you guys are used to working with who, what, where, when, why, it will naturally turn into some kind of summary, but even a spoken summary is a great start, right? So let's look at a text, right? Who is speaking? Well, maybe it says this is a picture of my family at a table, right? So you can see my mother, me, my brother, and my brother again. So maybe this is one of the females or another boy in this picture, but basically they're introducing the family, right? What? It's breakfast. When? Maybe on Saturday, right? And then it's the day of the week where they don't have to go to school. When, why, right? They're spending time with their family. They picked some vegetables from the garden, right? So basically you are talking about the comprehension of this, asking and answering questions about a text. Always you can do dialogue. So let's go to the next section where you'll see here, you can do it with charts. So when you ask a who, what, where, when, why question on the next slide, you'll see a whole bunch of different kinds of charts. So you can brainstorm, word map, cluster, word and content web. I mean, these are called so many different things, brainstorming bubbles, like whatever you want to call it. But when you ask and answer questions, have them put their ideas in some kind of graphic organizer. T-chart, definitely for academics, it's really going to help. I always say a T-chart can turn into 3 rows or 4 rows even, like rows this way, so columns. And then Venn diagram, great for compare and contrast. We haven't gotten there yet for the functions. That's a little bit of a higher skill, but know that you can do some of the words in there as well. All right, to the next slide, you are going to see that we have a lot of dialogue, right? Add to dialogue actually connects with the native language use. So as older students know a lot more in their very first language, maybe in their second language, and English is their third language, dialogue can come into play and be very helpful, right? So in their native language, they can really make dialogue a lot more complex than maybe a younger student. But either way, younger or older, dialogue is super useful. So definitely have them use that native language while they're thinking about it. I do want to talk about native language use in secondary specifically. I think Pamela is going to come back on at the end and talk about it in primary grades. But for secondary, native language use is something that can be very, very helpful if used correctly, when necessary only, and for a specific purpose. So for example, if you have a multi-level class, the students can use their native language for the higher level to translate something really quickly for the lower level students. As a teacher who taught Chinese and English as a second language to mostly Chinese students, if that wasn't obvious, you could then have something where I'm explaining a word and something like 幸福, there is no English translation for that word. It is something between super happiness, euphoria, and life is amazing, and all these different definitions of really, really like a great life, right? So I can't really explain that in English. It'll be too complicated. So if I just say the word in Chinese, boom, there is the idea put in their head, and I can move on. You can use native language when you're explaining grammar. Very, very carefully, word order, right? So especially with a lot of Asian languages, subject verb is flipped. Object is in a different place. So you can say a sentence in the native language, compare it to an English, and kind of make those connections. But again, it's really good to teach them, how do you say that in English? Because if you hear Spanish all the time, well, excuse me, how do you say that in English, right? Have them answer that question in English. And definitely dictionaries are helpful, but for secondary, they have so much access now to digital, like Google it, Baidu, which is a Chinese dictionary. I'm sure in every language they have their own digital stuff. It's very easy for them just to look up things. So native language use, I always allow it for specific purposes, but there needs to be some kind of rules to make sure they don't just start talking in their native language and you lose them. So I'm going to let Pamela pick up on that part.
Yeah, I definitely think that rules are super important. So being that I came from a district that basically had a one language component, we had to set pretty specific ground rules for our students, for our interpreters, for our teachers, so that our kids weren't falling back onto that reliance in the first language. Now, every building is going to be different, every kid is going to be different, but when you have your little people, it can be very easy for them to just expect the person they're talking to understand their first language. And thankfully, in my situation, they had peers that could, but when they would get all excited and they couldn't get things out in English, a lot of times it would come out in Spanish, and we would have to stop them, remind them to like point and show us what they're trying to tell us first, and then if they really can't get their expression out, to say it again to someone who could interpret for us and then communicate. But when it came to classroom buddies and things like that, there's typically always someone who was a higher level speaker in the classroom who could pair up with that newcomer and help them learn those basic survival things, walk them through their day, show them where things go, teach them those things when us as the ESL or the support teacher couldn't be in that classroom. So it was kind of the backup. But one of the things that we always had to work with our kids on was making sure that that other student isn't being taken away from the class activity. So if they're sitting near each other in the classroom, making sure it's not a deterrent for anybody's learning, and also making sure that there's a time and a place for when they are allowed to speak to one another in their native language. The playground is always a great place. Quiet time when they're reading and doing things like that, not the best idea, right? So I used to always have recess duty, and I would spend a lot of time talking to my kids in Spanish because that was the time that I allowed them to talk to me in Spanish. But during the day, it had to kind of be emergency based. So just kind of give some rules, set some boundaries for yourself, other interpreters in your building if you are in a similar situation, so that those students don't become heavily reliant on still communicating their thoughts and ideas out in their native language because they know someone around them can hear them and understand them. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. All right. Are going to move into this next set, and I think Brenda, you are going to talk about the connection here.
All right. So this chart kind of shows what we as Ballard and Ty have. We put some examples of our materials that may have not been so obvious in our presentation today, just to give you examples. Again, we are a company with pre-made curriculum, fully scripted. It's all there for teachers, whether you want to follow the scripting or not. Again, we did talk about our philosophy. So this chart kind of will tell you what you can look at if you're interested in curriculum based on the different grade levels. So Hands-on English is a fully comprehensive program for K12, right? So newcomer program, definitely. It's really only levels year 1 and year 2, right? And that is going to be covered there in Hands-on English for your littles. Reading, writing, listening, speaking. Assessment is part of it, checklist style, not like tests. And then you'll have some digital platforms that you can show the different slides that you need to talk about. You're going to do things like row, 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 go, go, go. I'm not the best person at this because I teach secondary. Yeah, but Hands-on English, super low newcomers, young kids. Carousel of Ideas is a little bit more for that comprehensive feel. We do have a newcomer program, so you could start with 0 English, K-5 if you want a whole program altogether. But we have all the way up to the level 5. So somewhere along the way this year, we are going to, maybe even next year if it spills over, we're going to cover different functions of language for different levels. So please follow us over time for webinars to come. But going back to Carousel of Ideas, really a great newcomer program all the way up to your exiting students for K-5. You're going to see frames for fluency. This one's a little bit different. It's supplemental in nature. You're going to feel very much that activity-based feel. And then you're going to have like that K-5 that works exactly lockstep with Carousel, but secondary newcomers, you'll see some pictures later on that will show you exactly. But 6 to 12 newcomers, really great year 1, maybe year 2, but really first 3 months, like, is super important. They need images, they need sentence frames, they need word and picture cards. This is the program, Frames for Fluency. Champion of ideas, rigor, rigor, rigor. Getting into the academic realm. However, we did start with the examples of naming things, survival language, you know, all the functions we just covered using Champion of Ideas. Even though the reading is kind of like a 1.5 level, no matter what, you know, tests or, you know, assessments you're using to score your students, but it is about rigor, it is comprehensive, everything's together, and it really is for newcomers. Okay, go ahead and show the pictures.
All right, so one thing you'll notice here with hands-on English is this is the only thing that we specifically align to a grade. So kindergarten and first grade, this is phenomenal. The reason that it is phenomenal, in my opinion, is that you're going to start with your students basically in the same place that that kindergarten teacher is going to work with them. And you're constantly practicing and reiterating the things that they're learning in the classroom with a focus on the oral output of language. So you can have multiple levels of students in the same group, and they're working towards that idea of becoming proficient in the English language, but also building the reading skills that they need to become readers as well. So it's really great activities for the students. It's more of a project-based program. It gives you the activities using the word and picture cards that we mentioned, as well as these really great big books. I think those are probably one of my favorite pieces of this program, because they come in a digital format as well as the printed. And the printed is just these big, gorgeous books that students are going to just fall in love with. They're going to be able to see them, touch them, you know, really engage with the text and also learn an academic skill from it as well. But you can see some examples here with the pictures of some of the activities that we do. Plus, our awesome teacher ePort really simplifies the structure for you, so you can go day by day through your lessons and not feel overwhelmed of what you need to print or prepare or do all those things. It lines it out right for you. English Maths is a part of our hands-on English program, but it's also its own special place. It can sit on its own and be really beneficial for students really through the 5th grade, I would say. K5 students could really use this for a lot of different ways. The big thing that I mentioned is, yes, this is from the K1 program. This is going to be a great focus for students learning to write in small spaces, learning to practice writing their target vocabulary, but the conversation corner on each picture is really where you want to focus for those K1 students to get the oral output of what they see in the pictures based on your questions you're asking. But they come with their own lesson plan as well, and students of other ages who are maybe growing their writing skills could then take a conversation corner question using the target vocabulary and answer in a sentence, 3 sentences, a paragraph, maybe even if you're doing a poetry lesson, maybe they'll write a poem. It gives you something really bright and vibrant to share around your classroom or your school building, and it gives the students an opportunity to really write something free form for themselves, just answering the question in the conversation corner. It doesn't name characters, it doesn't give the people specific names, so they really get to do some creative writing here as well. And then this is our big Frames for Fluency and Carousel combination slide. So Frames for Fluency, we mentioned, and you saw a lot of activities from that with the family picture and the sentence frames that we use. This is actually the supplemental program Brenda mentioned. Frames for Fluency can stand on its own and is perfect for all ages of that 0 level speaker with no English through probably that 1.5. You can start them anywhere in that gauge. The one thing that I always remind people is that this is oral output. So you can take it as the teacher and broaden the horizons and make it a little bit more writing, a little bit more listening or speaking or whatever you want it to be, because this program out of all of our programs is the most flexible in how you deliver that to your students. Our programs are scripted, so if you are new to teaching newcomers or EL students, it helps you kind of guide you until you're comfortable kind of teaching it on your own. So Frames for Fluency is this middle section here. Then you'll see going around this outer corner, we have our Carousel of Ideas program. This program is again mentioned from K to 5th grade, but it's also all ELD levels. Okay, so it's going to be based on the ELD level, how you assign materials to your student or teach to your student. I love this program because it spans across all the levels in that age band, but also it teaches the process of writing in that last section. One of the biggest gripes I hear from teachers constantly is how students need more writing practice. This program really takes reading and focuses in on reading, but then as they grow and become stronger readers, it starts focusing in on the writing too. So they really develop their skills if they work through the entire program, which is phenomenal. And if they don't work through the entire program, the next one that Brenda is going to present to you will show you how you can transition from carousel into the higher level students for your older kids as they grow. Oh, and here's just a smaller picture of frames. Sorry.
So Frames for Fluency for 6 to 12 is like a 3-month to 6-month program as a bridge into our next one, Champion of Ideas. So this is Frames for Fluency supplementally for newcomers for that 0 to about a 1.5, right, in language learning. Images, sentence frames, easy to teacher guide, quick, let's get them into Champion of Ideas. All right, so Champion of Ideas is this, it's going to be, I know it doesn't show a lot here in this picture, but it just think textbook. Textbook style is the paper-based. You have a paper teacher guide as teachers, completely scripted, or you can do digital. So students and teachers can be on our digital platform. Teachers could be digital, students on paper, teachers digital, students everyone paper. So you have different options to do this. We have different levels. Red level is a 2-year program, and it starts generally after students have enough foundational language. Again, that first day of school was a first reading, just to give you an idea of where it does start, right? But the idea is it goes all the way up to exiting students. So we have all the way up to your 4s and 5s if you need to get them out of EL. So Champion of Ideas, complete rigor, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, academic, social language is also there. And we'll see a little bit more of the functions as we go through the webinars. So at this point, I'm going to talk really quickly about our IPT program. We have our assessment platform for testing students. Some of you may have your own way of testing, but if you want to use an additional or in place of, I know some of you can't do that in place of, but the assessment, it's going to have pre-K, so the littles all the way up to 12th grade. There are these oral student, individual student diagnostics. So if you give the oral test alone, it's going to align directly to what do they need to work on in Carousel? What do they need to work on in Champion? On page exactly, what you can do to target some of more of that intervention and learning. And of course, you can progress monitor over time, but our IPT platform is amazing, paper as well as digital. All right, the next slide. So we are going to try questions, Emily. I know I left us with 2 minutes left, as usual. We're so good at that. But yeah. Emily is going to show you this slide, and we'll explain it after we do some questions.
Okay, well, thank you both so much. It's always worth the down to the last minute. You have such great information. So, and we've had a couple people ask if we're going to be sharing the slide deck along with the recording, and the answer to that is yes, you will get the slides and the recording. So just keep an eye on your email either tomorrow or Friday. We'll get that out to you. But yes, let's try to just get in a few questions. This one we probably could have a whole webinar on, but I'm still just going to ask and see if you can give 30 seconds of information. But at the secondary level, high school in particular, how do we better support students with secondary grade level content, curriculum, and standards?
Yes. So I always believe in teaching second language with any kind of content. So maybe the content isn't exactly the science curriculum or the history curriculum. Content-based instruction is hugely important. So for example, in Champion of Ideas, you will have ELA type readings, you'll have science readings, you'll have history readings. So it's not about the content you're helping them with, it's how to read the content in a content area classroom. And that's your job as an ELD teacher or EL teacher to help them with that. So try to find articles, textbook-based things, but at their level. So if you choose a history, US history reading from their history textbook, it's going to be a little bit too difficult, right? Especially for a newcomer. But if you could find some kind of US history reading that's a little bit lower level, we have some great ones in Champion, that will be definitely helpful.
And in terms of all the great products that you went through, do you know if Title III funds can be used to purchase?
Yes.
Absolutely. That is probably the majority of what our schools use. So if for some reason you need something to not say certain words, let us know. Conversate with us as best as you can, and we will help make sure that you can get that PO pushed through for sure.
Yep. And we have some that are comprehensive, but supplemental programs is where I will see a lot of that use.
Yeah. Yeah, the Ballard and Ty programs are so flexible, and I can tell you Pamela and Brenda are so flexible themselves to try to make sure you get the right program and figure it out in your budget. So give them a call. Their information's there on the screen, and we'll also share it with you in that follow-up email. Let's just get one more question in. So how can I get reluctant students to speak up more? Folks who are shy, folks who are nervous.
I'll do that first because I'm gonna guess there's a lot of the secondary language. My first year of teaching 5th through 12th grade in one classroom, I asked questions and they stared at me, put their head down, didn't want to talk to me. Games. Always make it games, challenges. I know a lot of people don't like the word games. Learning activities. Do some learning activities with them. Make it competition, point-based. High school, middle school loves this. Kind of trick them into learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I use games, especially because it's engaging for little people. They love that activities, but I worked a lot in middle school, and that was a really hard thing for middle schoolers because they're in that weird time of just kind of getting through life, let alone another language. So finding ways to connect with them to things that they liked, even if I had to use their peers to communicate with them or whatever it was, finding that interest. So just like you guys know, invest in your kids and they'll come around eventually. It just may take a little bit more time for some of them than others. Yeah. So
yeah,
Emily,
patience is one of the key strategies there.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we move on, I just noticed a few people coming through my inbox, so I wanted to make sure we share this. The QR codes on the screen are 2 separate codes. You will find that mine is to your left under the East Coast booking, and Brenda's is to the right. We cover different territories. So I cover all 25 states on the east side of our country, which is crazy that we have that many that are considered the east coast of our country. So if you are in Eastern Standard Time, you are going to be in my line of sight. So you'll want to hit the QR code over to my side. And then anybody from that side on of the Mississippi and over, you can go ahead and connect with Brenda using her QR code here. We do work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I myself, Eastern Standard. Her is Pacific Standard Time. So just kind of be mindful of that. We may take 24 to 48 hours to get back to you depending on, you know, all the different things we have going on. But you can scan those QR codes. They will directly input our information into your phone. It will give you a direct link to schedule an appointment with us here as well. So, and then if you feel the need to share and you want to share with us, you can share your contact info and we can follow up with you as well.
Thanks for outlining that, Pamela. And again, we will share both Brenda and Pam's contact information in the follow-up email that will include the recording, the slide deck, and your certificate of attendance. So lots of opportunities to reach out to Brenda and Pamela, but I know if you've got questions and want things now, scan those QR codes and connect immediately. We're happy to have that happen. So
absolutely.
Thank you, Brenda and Pamela, for being here with us today and going through all of this. It's such helpful and a great way to kick off the school year. We're certainly wishing everybody who joined us today a great school year. Hoping for all the best for you and your students, and know you'll put your full effort into helping these English learners learn the skills that they need to be successful. So thanks for all that you do, and we look forward to having you back on an upcoming webinar. So do keep an eye on the Ballard and Ty website as well as your inbox for invites for upcoming webinars. So thanks everybody and have a great afternoon.